Okay, Adrienne Ross hails from New York, where she was a 7th grade public school English teacher for nearly 20 years. She moved to Missouri several years ago and has worked as a copy editor at Breitbart News for the past 10 years. She is also the author of 3 books, a speaker, a podcast host, and the owner of Adrienne Ross Communications. She has delivered presentations, keynotes, and commencement addresses to schools, churches, and organizations and businesses. As a John Maxwell a certified speaker, trainer, coach, and behavior analyst, Adrienne has provided individuals, companies, churches, and organizations the leadership and communication training they need to excel. Adrienne writes under her own name and has also ghostwritten for politicians. She has a freelance writer and columnist for the Southeast Missourian for years and served on its editorial board. Currently, she does her writing on Substack, where people may subscribe to support and follow her work. A fun fact about Adrienne is that she is a sports enthusiast who coached 6 years of high school girls varsity basketball in New York, her team winning the conference championship in her 5th year. The first ever girls' championship in the history of the school, then repeating it her 6th year. Most importantly, Adrienne is a Christian and desires to fulfill the call God has placed on her life. She attends Christ Church of the Heartland in Cape Girardeau, Missouri. And give her a hand. I'm going to go ahead here and introduce her co-buddy tonight, Pastor Zack Strong, pastor for Christ Church of the Heartland. He's been here in Cape Girardeau for 26 years and has pastored for a total of 41 years, right? Okay, and that's what I got on him, so I'm going to let him expound, and the two of them can come forward, give them a big hand, and let's get started.
Are we here?
Sure, all the way up to the front of the room. Yeah, we can just let you have to take one question answer. Yours is off. All right. And then
Let's spell it hard. I got that.
I will be
Kim did it. No, it just fell apart.
your microphone fell.
Oh,
All right,
But it
so
still works.
I have a big mouth, so.
It still works.
It still works. Good evening. I would have a hot flash right before. I was doing well. I'm usually freezing in here. Bring a jacket, right? Then right when you have to step up, hot flash time. Some of you will relate to that. Thank you so much for the introduction. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. I can't even tell you, I'm really excited. I hope you are. You're gonna realize that you need to be. I'll tell you more yet. But I'm really excited to be here with you. I'm excited to be here with my pastor, Pastor Zack Strong, and I'm excited because this is going to be really unique, right, Pastor? We were here a few months ago, and this is going to be different than it was then. It's going to be different from how we usually present and maybe how you're used to presenting, because you are going to be a key part of tonight's presentation. So I hope you're ready. So I'm excited because as you heard from the Bible, I'm from New York. I cannot believe that next month will be 10 years since I've been in Missouri. 10 years since I stood in the classroom and taught. Where did the time go, right? I was a lot younger, and I wasn't having hot flashes when I moved here. But here we are, right? No, but I'm really excited because one of the things I really loved about teaching, 7th grade English, I love teaching. I love, imparting information and all that stuff that teachers do. But one of the things I really loved to do was to facilitate conversation. Whether you're reading my favorite book, To Kill a Mockingbird, as everyone who knows me well knows, that's my favorite, whether it's that or something, I love to draw out what's inside I love to draw what was inside of those young people. And I learned that if I listen enough, I'll learn quite a bit from them. So it's not just me standing there thinking I have, all information, but it's listening to them. And there is something, I believe, about when you open your mouth and you begin to voice what you're thinking, it brings clarity. And so we're going to be pulling on you to share some tonight. So let me start first with this. Who is concerned with what's going on in the country? How many of you have some concerns? Just hands. Okay. All right. That's just about everybody. And but I got to ask this question, and it's it's been set. The stage has been set, so to speak, because I love to hear. I love to hear start in prayer and talk about the word. How many of you here are people of faith? You're Christians. You're committed to the Lord. Raise your hand. Okay, and if you're not, we'll make sure we get you there before we end tonight. But okay, so the reason why I asked that question is because I really feel that is key to what Pastor and I will talk about. And having Pastor here, this is going to be a really informal. We're going to be here and there, all over the place. I don't know where we're going to end up, but I love doing this with Pastor because I appreciate his wisdom and pull on his wisdom and his experience. But I ask how many of you are people of faith, because how many of you know that when you're talking to people of faith, there's a different expectation from the group. There should be a different expectation because we are people of faith. We are Christians. We know the Lord. And so the things that we're going to bring out shouldn't be foreign, but I pray that we are inspired by it. Because sometimes we can just, I've heard that before. But my prayer has been, I know Pastor's been praying too, how do we drop some seeds that won't just stay here, but that we can actually do something with them? And that's what that's what we're going today. So you raised your hand about that. Now here's my question. Who feels that you have a role? I said, how many of you are concerned? Now my question is, how many of you really feel that you, individually, you have a role to play in righting the ship? Just with your hands. You feel that you have a role to play. I notice some people are raising their hands, some people are hesitant, but I think that's key for the conversation we're going to have tonight. Now, how many of you feel that you are engaged in the fight to right the ship? Okay. And now those aren't all the same hands. So I'm thinking about, Jan quoted this scripture I have written here in my notes. I turned to my friend Christy and I said, I have that written here. She said, for such a time as this. Because here it is. Who knows that, in Esther, it's like, who knows if you have been brought here for such a time as this. And I feel that this is a message for people of faith in particular to understand that we are here for such a time as this. And there obviously is a need. I don't just want to say that, but I want to hear from you also. So the subjects tonight that Pastor and we talked about that we're going to share, there are two. And it may look all kinds of different ways, and it will. One subject is unity, and the other subject is significance. Because we as a people have to make a difference. And I love what Kim said first, because the first and foremost, obviously, is we need that relationship with God. We need that time with God. But we just can't stay in the prayer closet. We have that time with God, and then as Kim is doing, we take that and we make a difference with that. Because we're here for such a time as this. So unity and then significance. Now, Pastor, I want to start with unity with Pastor because, Pastor, we have core values at Christ Church of the Heartland. And one of the core values that Pastor added to the list is this: we are better together. And what I want to hear from, and who's here from Christ Church?
Good, sir.
Look at that. Look at that. All right. But one of the core values that he brought to the church is we are better together. So my question for Pastor is, how did you come up with that? You know, what does it mean and what does it look like?
Well, that's a great question. By the way, because I didn't give them a proper written thing, and they told me to do this. I have been doing pastoring for almost 41 years, or right at 41 years, a number of years in Paducah, my hometown, before I came here. And then we came here at the end of 97. We're involved in a number of mission organizations where I sit on the board and work with them and go overseas and do all that kind of stuff. And of course, we lead a number of leaders around the region and different places and involved, you know, just with different ministries, which I do love. And so here's the question or my answer to the question you just had. Just because we're in the room doesn't mean we're together. We're just in the room. We're on the ship. And we got a great big ship. When you asked that question a while ago, this thing is huge. And it's overwhelming. I don't know about you, but most time I feel overwhelmed. But one of my favorite passages of Scripture, and as a pastor, that's all I can come at you with, all right? As a pastor, we'll come like this, that I use a lot of times with leaders and in different places. It's 1 Chronicles chapter 11, verse 10. And it says something like this. These are the chief of the mighty men who joined themselves with David to make him king according to the word of the Lord concerning Israel. So if I broke that down, the key focus in there of what God was speaking was about the nation of Israel, right? But in order for the nation of Israel to be blessed, it had to have a proper king. And that king was David. But in order for that king to be positioned, he had to have these men around him that help him become king. Because that is the will of the Lord. Now, I believe it's the will of the Lord for our nation to prosper. I believe it's the will of the Lord for our nation to be on top. I really believe that with all my heart, that righteousness rules the nation. But there has to be a proper king. There has to be proper leadership, proper order. Even God set that in motion. As the king goes, so does the nation goes, in a sense. So if we don't get the right authorities, if we don't get the right people in position. But how did David get there? Here's the interesting thing about David. David was a shepherd, not even recognized. Sometimes the most significant people, I'm going to touch significance in here, it's not the people you think. It's the people maybe just like you and me that are sitting in this room that somehow David comes along and we recognize the hand of God upon their life. And we've got to find that David. You know where those people came from, those mighty men? Remember, David was the 8th son of the son of Jesse. When the prophet Samuel was sent into the city to anoint a new king, because the king that was there was definitely perverted and not of the plan of God. He was rebellious. So all the sons of Jesse come, 7 of them, and all of them are refused by the hand of God. And the prophet has to ask, is there not another? Yeah, I've got one. He's back there. He's not even recognized in a sense by his own father. But he comes and the prophet pours the oil. It's a big story. Pours the oil on his head. And David goes right back to the sheepfold, even though he's anointed to be king. You said for such a time as this. Sometimes, my friend, we are in the process of being prepared and don't even know what we're being prepared for until the right time comes. But we can't get there by ourselves because sometimes somebody's got to shove you in position. Hello? So now David's got this insignificant task. His brothers are gone off to war because a great giant has put all of Israel in silence and backed them up and stopped them. And Dad gives him one insignificant, seemingly assignment. Go take some bread, go take some cheese and some wine. I want you to go check on the welfare of your brother, but come back and give me report. And when he gets there is when Goliath roars, and David said, and here's what David did, because all of Israel's backed up in fear. Listen, not everybody is called to get into the fight as much as we think they are. Don't misunderstand that. We're all in, but we may not be the one going to shoot the arrow or sling the stone, all right? So David gets there, and when he gets there, he hears this giant roar, never takes a look at him, never does anything, and he asks this, who is this uncircumcised Philistine? And I love what David asked after, report come, they's trying to shut him up, especially his brothers. David said, what am I going to get if I take that boy out? And the report came, you'll get the king's daughter, and you don't have to pay taxes the rest of your life. David didn't question anything from there, but David went after the giant, and everybody was telling him he couldn't, or they told him he had to do it this way, and he even tried to put on their armor, and he said, listen, I haven't proven that, but I do know what I've been proved by. I've been proven by God, and I've taken out a giant, or I've taken out a bear, and I've taken out a lion, and this uncircumcised Philistine is no bigger than them. And the story goes, he takes him out and kills the giant. Did you know from there, everybody's shouting, David has slain his tens of thousands, and Saul has slain his thousands. Then they start throwing javelins, or Saul started throwing javelins at David, because he sees the victory is in the hand of David. Now David's on the run. To make a long story, get it back to her, because she's the main character here. That's true. All that stuff you did, my goodness. So David is on the run, and he comes by a cave. It's called the Cave of Adullam. It's found in, I believe, in the book of 1 Samuel 22, somewhere thereabouts, I believe. And when he gets there, there's a bunch of people in that cave that are in fear of what's going on in the land of Saul. And the Bible said they're fearful, they're in debt, and they're discontented. In other words, they've lost their hope. And when David arrives, something in them says, we got to make you king. And he is nothing but a youth in the eyes of most people. But we got to make you king. And that began to set David on emotion. So here's the question you asked me. Why are we better together? Sometimes it's me recognizing who I am, but recognizing who you are, and realizing I may not have the voice, I may not have the strength, I may not even have the weapon that you have, and maybe my assignment is to come along behind you and say, come on, Adrienne, let's get on with this. I believe you're called. Maybe I got a few pennies in my pocket that you don't have, and it may seem insignificant, but I'm going to take my few pennies and I'm going to support you. Or maybe it's not that I have a few pennies, but I can definitely go to prayer, and I can encourage you, and I can encourage everybody around you. I believe this is a person that we need to rally behind and encourage her to go so that the nation is better. So that's why we're better together. Not because we're in the room. We've got, I don't know how many people are here, maybe 60, 70 people, but we got 70 different opinions. How you know that? Look how you're dressed. Look how you're dressed. I mean, that tells us we've all got different opinions, but boy, if we could ever put that energy together into one, we're better off, listen, not doing 500 things, but doing 5 things that can count and impact and really get something done.
Mm-hmm. That's good. That's really good. Yeah. We are better together. Now, I wasn't going to go there yet, but you took me there, so I'm going to ask you this question. Because whenever you use the word together, and I'm believing that this will be practical, it's already practical for us. When you hear the word together, like you said, we have all these different opinions, we have all these different experiences, we have these different backgrounds. And it can be you use the word overwhelming. When we look at what faces us in this nation, in this world, it can be extremely overwhelming and fearful and all those things, okay? And so sometimes when we recognize our call, Pastor, and our passion, we get extremely frustrated with others who don't seem to have the same passion. Like, how come everybody's not fired up about this? How come everybody's not attending this meeting or that meeting or that? We get extremely frustrated, and we're like, come on, don't you recognize the times? You know, and all that. So Pastor, and that's a reality. How do we, are they wrong if they're not doing it our way? Or how do we handle that very real, you know?
That is a real situation. I don't care if it's in politics. I don't care if it's church. I don't care if it's in this room, serving out there. That is a real issue. But sometimes I believe it becomes a strategy of the enemy. It don't take the enemy a lot. He studied us more than what we've studied. I really believe that with all of my heart. He works overtime to know what pushes our buttons and your buttons. As a pastor, if I'm not careful, I'll get my eye on the church across town or the church over there that I think is blowing and glowing and doing everything, and I'll get so bent out of shape over that I'll really stop doing what I've been assigned to do. And so we really have to be more mindful and more attentive to what our rose is. A while ago when you opened up asking the different reports, and some of you, my goodness, I'm thinking, you're making my head swim, and we haven't even got started yet. But all the stuff that goes on. I know we need information, but not everybody has the inroad. And if we do get information, we better make sure that it's right. And we just didn't get it off of a 20-second, Facebook post, because they are so many and so frequent, and they're coming from every different direction. Who knows what is real? But our passion should be focused. It's not that I get my way, really, but it's that the end result is what we're after, and we constantly have to be mindful. It's not really a correction, but I want to say something a while ago. I said, in my little story back there about the fearful, not everybody, is going to be involved. You remember when God, again, Bible story, when God spoke to this great host had come against the people of God, and Gideon is hiding, and God says, "Rise up, you mighty man of valor, and you're gonna overtake this people." The first thing that he said, "Let the fearful go home." Now, he wasn't saying they weren't involved, but he said, I can't put them on the front line because they're going to get us killed. Because sometimes you got a big mouth that doesn't need to be out there. Did you ever hear that saying, loose lips sinks ships? Because it gave away our strategies to our enemies in the middle of the ocean. That cost us our ships is where that came from, and the lives of many, many men. And sometimes we've got the wrong people in the wrong place. And he said, let those that are fearful, just send them home. Because right now they'll cause us more trouble than good. And then I think out of that was a lot of them. And then he said, take them down to the creek and let them drink. He told them how they would drink. And those that would drink with their reaching down and getting a handful of water and keeping a watchful eye up, those guys were allowed to stay, but the others went home because there was only 300 of them left. And God said, if I have 300 that know how to work together, that will stand in order together, I can get more done than I can if I have a multitude, because sometimes we got people getting in the way. So that's why I said what I said. But we have to really be mindful of what our role is. And I'll shut up with this. Back a year ago, I think it was, we were asked, I went to another meeting that came to town like this, can't remember what it was, and they asked us to, as pastors, run for office. And I really thought about that. I told my church a few months ago, I said, if I run for office, I'm going to run for mayor. I want to get these streets fixed in this town. My goodness, they're terrible. They're terrible. That's my platform. But then, Miss Jan, she was praying with me about that, and we conversed a little bit about that, and I really took that to the Lord in prayer. And I thought, that's not my role. I can talk in front of a group of people. Y'all already found that out. But I thought, that's not my role. What I'd rather be is a prophet to the king. I would rather be able to stay on my knees in prayer and go to that brother if he goes to office and say, hey, God just said this. What are you going to do with this now? I can't make him change it, but I can be a voice of the Lord and a voice of righteousness to stand and hold up the arms of those that are in me. That's just a little bit of knowing our place.
That's good. Yes. Instead of, so we work together instead of I'm going to take my toys and go home because I don't like how it's going down.
Yeah.
We work together. It's good. All right, I want to show you a video here. One of the things that I started doing on the Adrienne Ross show, and Jill's representing there with the t-shirt, thank you. But one of the things that I started doing a couple months ago is something that I called taking it to the streets. Because like I said, I like to hear from other people. And I made up my mind that I'm going to go and I'm going to ask just random people, go to the college campus, go on Broadway, go wherever, and ask people questions. I'm not there to combat them. I wasn't even necessarily there to challenge them. Now, there's a time and a place for that. I have some friends who've seen videos who've said, how did you, I know you wanted to say something, but I didn't. I kept my mouth shut. And actually, Pastor kind of joked, but I know he was serious about the streets. One of the questions I was asking about change, and you'd be surprised. Infrastructure, the streets are terrible, so you're not alone in that. People are feeling that way. But anyway, we're going to show the one that's called Unity. So, yeah, I want to show this to you. This one. This is one of the conversations, just a piece of a conversation that I had with this young man.
I'm pretty close to graduating college. I'll graduate in December. I mean, probably easier said than done, obviously, but, every president says the unity, so much stuff. There's so many important things that, Congress, is trying to get passed and all these projects, but they, look at the government shutdown that they narrowly avoided for probably 3 years in 40 days or whatever. It's just constant bickering back and forth, and I get it to some extent. But
How do you unify?
That's a tough one.
That's a tough
one.
We all just be caring,
For sure.
understanding humans.
Yeah.
But as I can see from talking to you guys and then talking to you, the worldview is different.
It's different.
And that doesn't that cause the friction?
I suppose.
But they need more people to listen to it. Like we just listen to him and understand where he's coming from. And he's understanding where we're coming from. It's not the same, but we gotta meet some. The world has to meet together and grow together.
For sure. I met you guys a few minutes ago. I don't know anything about you guys. You seem fine. I don't know. But, the average person does not just, hate people. There is so much just talk of, everyone hates everyone, Like I said, the idea that, if you're Republican, you're automatically racist or homophobic. Not true, obviously.
And if you're a black Republican, then you're a sellout.
Yeah.
And there's that whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's interesting. The division, the name calling.
Okay, so
You're close to graduating college. I graduated.
no, that's okay. Yeah, so he's just about to graduate college, and here's this young man. And I was talking to the couple that you saw me flash over to. I was talking to them first. I didn't know they were on their first date. I was interrupting them. They were on their first date. They seem to be meshing very well. If you haven't watched this episode, you need to watch it because there was a lot in. This is just a little bit, but the way this young man got involved in the conversation is he was walking by, and he heard I was ending with the other two, and he heard the man say, "All Democrats hate the country." That's what he heard, and he just said, "That's not true." He's just walking by down there. He said, "That's not true." And then I'm like, oh yeah, you want to get on? Oh, you know? And so he joined the conversation. And it was hard to hear at first, but what he was saying was, I was like, what would you do? What do you want for change? And he said, it's easier said than done, but it's unity. And I'm thinking, but your worldview is different. And then she dropped some knowledge because she said, but just like we listened, and he's just like, yeah, some people say, well, then you're a Republican, then you hate you hate these people, you hate that people. And so much disunity, whether it's in politics, whether it's in the church, wherever it is, it's because we don't listen. Am I right? So we see an enemy sometimes that's not really an enemy. Now there are enemies, and we don't need to make some up. So where can we find common ground? And you see where they did. And sometimes I say, well, there's light and there's dark, but there's some areas where there's common ground. And it starts, and maybe there isn't. But how you know if you don't listen? And I think unity is so important in that, especially for people here who raised your hands and said you feel that you have a role to play in righting the ship. So listening is an important part of that. So I thought that was important. Now, Pastor, so that's unity. Now, I also said I wanted to talk about significance. And Pastor already jumped into significance. And I'm going to add my 2 cents because I think it is absolutely necessary that we recognize that we are significant, as Pastor brought out even with David, that it's easy sometimes to look at the other person. Sometimes it's not. But it's easy to look at the other person sometimes and say, well, that person is significant, but not me.
Yeah.
And do you know that right now, with everything going on, we need everybody. And here's my concern when we fall down to the lie of insignificance. One, we don't engage at all because we don't see our value. We don't see that there's something that we have to offer to the fight. So we don't engage. Or there are people who are engaged, but because they don't recognize their significance, they don't believe what they're doing really matters. And I believe that when you don't realize what you're doing, you might be doing, but when you don't realize that what you're doing matters, it affects the way you do. I believe you show up differently when you know that your being there makes a difference. But if you're just on going to the school board meeting, or you're just the Sunday school teacher, or you're just the homeschool mom, or whatever it is that we put just in front of, I think it affects how effective we can be. But when we recognize the value that God has given, that He has purposed every one of us, I think it causes us to want to do the thing that God has called us to do. I think about Mary when the angel came. I mean, historians or ever say that she was, or theologians say she was like 13 or 14 years old. And she's just like, self-described as someone of low estate. But yet she embraced it. She opened her mouth and said, "Be it unto me according to your word." And I know there are people who believe that it was at that moment that conception took place. She didn't stay stuck in the low estate, what her age was. She embraced it. I just wonder what we all could do, and I'm not preaching at you, I'm just saying myself, what we could all do if we embraced the significance. Pastor, you want to say any more on that?
Oh. And it's great everywhere. Mm-hmm. Look around this room and I see no doubt parents, grandparents sitting here. And the significance of a mom taking care of her children.
Yes.
Significance of a husband or a father working hard, providing for his family. Well, I'm just, I'm just a carpenter. I'm just this. And we don't realize who maybe even through our children, what we're doing with them. It didn't just start now. Sometimes one of our problems is we get on at the wrong time. And then we want to change everything like that. My nephew, by marriage, is Secretary of State of Kentucky. And ever since he was, Michael Adams is his name, if you watch Channel 6 and see that he's on there all the time. But ever since he was a little bitty baby, he said, I want to be president of the United States. That was his goal. But I know he had a grandfather that believes in him. And I watched a grandfather who was in a banking business stand with that young man and kept investing in him and declaring who he was. Not just his grandfather, but that was a significant of the family. But his parents and the whole family kept investing into Michael and saying, Michael, you can do it. If you can dream it, you can make it happen. And eventually Michael has become Secretary of State. I don't know if the ambition to be president is still there, especially after what he's gone through of just being Secretary of State. That he's fought against being a Republican, going against a hard-fought battle in a Democratic state has been very, very difficult for him. But nonetheless, he's made a stand. And the significance is you may not see what you're doing, and it may be so small compared to what our sister over here did, or Doc back there, and these others that go to the school board. Maybe you just don't feel like that's your place, but it doesn't mean you don't have significance in the role.
Absolutely. Very good. Thank you. You're sitting down, but I don't want you to, because one of the things that we grapple with sometimes, if we're honest, is I know that I should be engaged, but I honestly don't know what that looks like. At different phases of our lives, we go through that. Like, what is my role? What am I supposed to do? And so there's nothing like a personal story. So you're a pastor. Pastors are called because nobody would do it. I guess there are some who do it, but those with the right heart don't do it. They don't anoint themselves that, right? How did you know about what your role is in the ministry?
Well, that's great. Coming up, just to say this, what she said, this isn't my job. This is my call. This is who I am. That's why I can do what I do. I don't have to be at a pulpit to preach. I can do it. I can sit in your car and do it with you, wherever. But I knew this when I was a little boy, 8 years old, that the call of God to preach this gospel came to me in a little church on the corner of 6th Street and Elizabeth, as the scripture would say about John. And John was in the Spirit on the Lord's Day on the Isle of Patmos. And all I heard was a little boy, God say, preach. I can't tell you, it wasn't thundering out here, it was something in here. And I believe as I've gotten older, and please hear this, the vision didn't grow in me. I've grown into the vision. I believe everything that God planned for my life was spoke that morning. But I couldn't see it. All I could hear was preach. But everything I did began to be significant to fulfill the purpose of God. I believe He saw me here with Adrienne and all of you on this night. He talked to me about that back there. But if He had told me back there, what are you talking about? I don't know. I wouldn't have understood it. But along the journey, He put me in the path of different people. Some encouraged me, others pushed on me. But all of it was a part of bringing me to the part of fulfilling the call that God has given me.
And you had to say yes.
I had to say yes.
You had to say yes. Now, as far as, I'm going to say this and then I'm going to move out here because like I said, you guys are going to be involved in this next part. But when I was a teacher for almost 20 years, an English teacher. But when I was born, my Aunt Mary said to my mother, name her Adrienne because she's going to be a school teacher. Now you're probably thinking, what in the world does that have to do with being a teacher? I don't know. I didn't ask. She's gone now. I can't ask, but maybe she knew a teacher whose name. I don't know. I'm into name meanings. Adrienne does not mean teacher. Adrienne means dark, which I have fulfilled that. And Adrienne means rich, and I am working on that. But that's what she said. Name her Adrienne because she's going to be a school teacher all my life. I didn't want anything to do with being a school teacher. I was a student when I got older. I knew how we are. I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to be an actress, actually. For most of, up until I think I got saved, up until probably when I went to college, I was going to be, I soon learned that teaching good literature was a lot like acting. So it was all good. But that was always spoken over my life. But I'm so grateful. I mean, every time, when I would do a presentation in college or I would do something, it would be confirmed. It would be, have you ever thought about being a teacher? I don't want to be a teacher, But people saw something in me. Sunday school, you're the one who's going to get up and do the presentation. I was like, leave me alone. But my aunt wouldn't let them leave me alone. But I see the hand of God that was in it all along, But in my book, and I'm going to share this because I said a lot of times we want to know, what does that look like? So I wrote a book, Push Your Way to Purpose, and I talk about 3 ways to identify your purpose. And I really believe that this is true. One thing to do is to ask yourself, what do I love? I truly believe that can be an indication to what you are to be doing. What is it I love? Number 2, what do I hate? And people often say, well, how does what do I hate reveal what I may be called to do? Because I've learned in my life that thing that just gets you, nobody else seems to be moved by it, but you are. That's an indication sometimes. Sometimes we get mad in the church, pastor, and we'll say, oh, they don't have a good enough women's ministry. Or in my case, they don't have which I lived through this, I don't have a singles ministry. I used to be all bent out of shape, not at our church, but back in New York. And I went through a whole dark period about that. And I remember a friend of mine saying to me, maybe you're the one who should do something about it. No, we look to the pastor. You didn't do this, and I hate injustice. Now, we all hate injustice. But then there are some people who really, they hate injustice. They're walking the floor. Yeah. They're tears. They're moved like no one else. They hate that thing. Why? Because they've been called to make a difference there.
Yeah, that's good.
So don't disregard what you hate. Maybe God wants to use you to do something about it. So what do you love? What do you hate? And then I already talked about what are other people. Pay attention to what other people speak over your life. Not everybody can speak over your life, but there are people, there are voices, there are people you can trust who are saying, like, you're going to be a teacher. You got a voice. You're going to do this. And I'm like, but here I am, right? Taught for 20 years. Never thought I'd do that. So those are some indications. Now, I talked to you about taking it to the streets, and I want to bring that to you. I want to accept, when I do take it to the streets, I just pick people. I just stop people. But I'd rather get volunteers. And we can, kind of jump in and out on this, pastor, as well. I might press you a little bit more than I would press someone else. But here's what I want to ask you. As we talk about significance, we talk about being unified or whatever. Here's the question. If you were leader of the country or your area, whatever, if you were the one in charge, okay, what would be priority for you day one? Anybody? You got one right there, okay.
Try your best to think positive and always have your hope that there is better things coming, and then believe in a higher power and it'll happen.
Okay. Now, how does that look though? Like you're the leader. You're the president, let's say, or the mayor. What are you doing or what are you setting in motion day one?
I really hate to say this. Grow up and get things done. Quit acting like children.
Okay.
They need to work together, and that's the theme. They need to work together.
So you're going to encourage that?
Yeah. Encourage working together instead of little fights here and there.
Okay. Keep it moving. Yes, please.
No, you're good. That's good.
I'd say one really important thing is to know your enemy. And if you refer to Ephesians, we're fighting a spiritual battle. This isn't Republican versus Democrat. It's not conservative versus liberal, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We're fighting a spiritual battle. And we need to know and recognize our enemy. And there are a lot of people here that are fighting real evil in the various things that they've undertaken, whether it be school board or health board or whatever it happens to be. But we learn in Ezekiel and also in Isaiah about the watchman on the wall. We are the watchman on the wall. If we see danger coming and we don't warn people and educate them about the danger that's coming, then we're going to be responsible for their outcome.
Okay, Madam President, what does that look like specifically? What are you going to do?
Okay, specifically, while you're waiting to figure out what God's putting you to, there's one thing we've all been given as a task to do. It's called witnessing to people, okay? The Great Commission. Every single one of us who follows Christ has been given the Great Commission. So you can busy yourself with that until you have something specific that he tells you to go forth and fight.
Okay. All right, do we have another president in the room? Come on, somebody.
How about do the next best thing?
I'm sorry.
Michelle's over there.
Oh.
She's running for office.
Oh, yeah.
I got a big mouth.
Okay. Day one, Michelle. Day one.
Day one, I'm closing the border.
Okay.
First thing. Yes. And if I'm the mayor, I am taking us out of MRCTI, and the World Economic Forum is going to have my foot on their throat. That's what's happening.
And this is good that you have the microphone.
That's right.
Day
So,
one, sir.
Day one, we would abolish the Department of Education. Then we would audit the Federal Reserve. We would put a mandatory reduction on budget at 20% until we return to the amount of the spending in which gold, the financial spending in which gold we have in reserve. We would return back to the gold standard to drive inflation down. That would be the first two options, and every option that every step that I take after that would be to protect faith, family, and freedom.
Wow. All right. We got a few hands. Maybe I should move out here.
Go.
Drill, baby, drill.
Say it again. I missed that.
Drill, baby, drill.
Oh, drill, baby, drill. I love that.
I have 2 words. Term limits.
Okay, I think that's self-explanatory, right? Term limit. How many of you believe in term limits? Not everybody.
I think I would worry about our foundation in our schools. I'd put God back in the schools.
When you say put God back in the schools, what does that look like?
1963.
I would change everything from Lyndon Johnson forward. We've lost our foundation in this country. You can't build a house from the roof down. You have to build it from the bottom up.
This is what I would do. How would this really?
Okay, so that foundation has been. Okay, good. Somebody else. Yes.
Reestablish law and order.
Okay, say
Get our
more.
military back in place.
Say that again.
Reestablish law and order, get our military back in place.
Be more specific. When you say back in place, what do you mean?
I want to see the respect come back. I want to see them honored. I want to see them treated like they are what they are. They're our protectors.
How do we mandate that? How does that look?
Start making bullets again.
Give them the resources they need, right? Someone else?
Woke in the military.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
they've got them focusing on other stuff.
Right, yeah, focus on the point of the military.
Okay.
Over there, Adrienne.
That's how it works.
What would you do? First priority?
My first priority would be putting truthfulness back into the position and then trying to bring unity with that position to show the people that I can be trusted and that I am willing to, again, bring about fairness for the people. All these others are just ways to bring this about, but if I can't get the people to trust me in my leadership, then I just as well not have run. And back a long time ago, I was mayor for a little town instituted a program called Healthy Selfie. If I wasn't willing to do something myself, how can I help others?
Yeah. Hey, Adrienne, I want to tag on to that. When I came to Cape 26 years ago, I came into a very troubled situation. Very troubled. And it looked like they were about to shut the church totally down when I came. And when I came in at 40 years old, I'm 65, I still look 40, but when I came in at that time, I started throwing all kinds of vision out. We're going to do this, until one of my older saints at the time came to me and said this: "You don't want us, do you?" No, what are you saying that for? Well, you say it every week. I said, "You better let me hear that. Go get the cassette tape, because that's back then. I want to hear it." She said, "No, Pastor, you're missing it." She said, "All that you're talking about is out there. And you're not talking anything about where we are." And I had to keep in mind, they've lost trust. They're hurting. They're broken. And anything beyond that, I come in, and my heart was for them. I thought this is what they wanted. But what he just said triggered that, is that we have to have people back in office, and please hear this, sir, and any of you if they don't trust you, they'll not follow you. But we sometimes have to slow down a bit and rebuild the trust of the people to get them on board with us.
That's good. Great, Pastor.
We got one up here, Adrienne.
Yes, go for it.
Well, as an executive, the executive branch is only one branch of the government, but I'd rescind all overreach and executive orders that are unconstitutional. That's something I could do.
Return to the Constitution.
Let it come. Let it come.
Abolish the lobbyists. Okay, first thing. Okay. Anyone else? 'Cause I want to ask another question. All right, I'll halt here and ask it. Anybody have any idea why I asked what would be your number one priority if you were the chief, if you were the one in charge? Why do you think I asked?
To see if we're engaged.
That's what you should do.
Okay. That's good. Anybody else? Where our hearts are. Yes. She said where our hearts are. Because I think that's so important. When I stopped people on the streets and I said, whether it's the mayor, whether it's the president, whatever it is, if you could do something on day one, what would it be? The answers that I received indicated what was in their hearts.
Yeah.
It indicated either one, like I said in my book, which was, what do you love? Or it indicated, what do you hate? Whether it was these potholes in the street, whether it was the border being open, or you love the Constitution, or you love our military. It comes out whenever we take the time to listen and evaluate, what would I in fact do? So considering what it was, whatever came to your mind, whether you had the microphone or not, when you think about that, whatever your passion is, you're not president. Not everyone's going to run for office. But along the lines of what truly matters to you, of what is in your heart, what could we all be doing that is in alignment with what moves us, with what's important? Because it can't just be, and I'm talking to myself too, it can't just be Jan comes here, puts in a lot of work, and speakers come and all that, and then we just kind of go back to business as usual, come back for the next meeting, and then overdose on meetings. What is it that God has put in us that matters? I want to show you another video here called I think it's Back to the Basics, and this is just an interesting take. Some people were talking about getting back to the foundation. These young men right here, these young men right here, they were talking about that, right? The foundation. Let's hear this.
I think looking at how politics have gotten, it's gotten so more into the social media and how can I attract the most number of followers, get the most votes. I think for me it's just getting back to the roots, and for me that would be my faith. I think our country's lost that a lot.
And what's your faith?
I'm a Christian.
Okay, so am I. That's wonderful.
So to me, I think you just get back to the basics. I mean, that's kind of the groundwork of what our country was rooted in. I think we've gotten away from that. I'm all for change, and I'm all for accepting all kinds of people, but when you get away from the true values that I think our country was founded on, that kind of scares me. And I think you can, by just being an honest, good person and not trying to make people see what you want them to see and just show them the truth and who you are as a person, I think that's what can get you elected into office these days. I think that's what we need.
That's really good. Have we, as a nation, I know, like you said, we kind of got away from, right? Have we, as people of faith, lost the battle?
I don't think it's over at all. I think there's a lot of good people out here fighting a good fight. We're in really tough, evil time. I think it takes a unique person. And it's not just one person who's going to get it done. It's Christians as a whole, and it's basically building community. So I never think it's over. I think there's good people out here that'll never stop fighting. The short answer, no, I don't think it's over at all. I think I think we've gotten away from it. I think there's a way to find it again. So.
How old are you, Master?
I'm 21.
Because you sound like a young man who has his head on his shoulders. What are you noticing that might need some attention?
So for me, I go to school out of state. I grew up in Jackson, just down the road. I'm a senior. I'll be graduating soon, and it's funny because growing up, I always thought like, I don't want. There's more to life than just a small town in Missouri. But coming back here and just my girlfriend, she's from Oregon, so. So she's actually a hometown visit for us.
From Oregon.
Yeah, that's good. But so coming back, I mean, I think the one thing I see, especially in our schools, I think it's kind of about who you are, who you know, and it's gotten away of like what's the real purpose. That's in schools, for example, is to educate and to create leaders, people who are going to build up the community. I think when you start worrying about titles and what kind of position can you get to next, you get away from what you started to do in the first place, why you wanted to do it.
So whether we're talking nationally or whether we're talking locally, what I'm hearing from you is we need to get back to the basics.
It's the same. It's the same. You don't just change because of the title or because of recognition or notoriety or money, whatever it may be. Definitely get back to the basics. I think it's just, I hate to use the word corruption, but I think that's kind of what it gets to, is how can I find a little circle of people that are going to benefit the most and leave the rest of the people out.
Yeah, that's good. That's real good, especially from 21 years old. You, I have great hope for you. You better stick with this, right?
It's the silent majority in our country. It's the ones who aren't going to raise their voice that are the people that should be talked to the most. I think I fall in that category.
Anybody want to say anything about something that stands out from what he said?
He needs to be president. I said, he needs to be president.
A young man who's a very engaged person, who is listening and tuning into what's going on around him, not just in terms of what's going on political, but what's going on in the social as well. And unfortunately, you can't really disconnect the social and the political and the cultural. They're always intertwined. But you have someone, so many times you see people of a young age like that, they're very liberal in thinking, and this is a young man who comes across like he's got a much more mature perspective, because so much of the time the liberalism and the immaturity are intertwined, and he's understanding what's really going on and what's really at the core of so many of the problems we're dealing with.
Yeah. And I got to ask this, and I don't know if it's uncomfortable or what, but so I showed you the first video, young man, right? He was about to graduate from college, and he's talking about unity. He was calls himself a socialist, but he said at least we have to listen to one another. Then you have this young man who's just full of, sounds like wisdom, right? So when we take a look around the room here, like what do you notice about
No young people.
what did you say, Pastor?
No young people.
Excuse me, I'm one of the young people.
No, it's gonna, anybody here under 25?
Me.
Anybody here under 35?
I'm 51, but I look 25.
I got you.
That counts too. That counts for something.
The reality is, that is a great reality. And it's a great concern. I hear it out of you guys. I was asked that question not too long ago. A great concern is about our younger generation. And it's not that they don't care. We got to understand this. It's not that they don't care, but this doesn't drive them. This doesn't move them at all. They want to go at it in a lot of different ways. And this is something as a pastor that I'm realizing where I'm at. As a church getting older, my congregation was getting older, but my young people, the young adults and the younger ones weren't. And they were going to other directions. And it wasn't that they didn't like me, they didn't like the church necessarily. Our method of how we were doing wasn't feeding. And sometimes we have to realize in a generation, the message never, ever changes. But the method has to. Why did you push something? Well, if you don't mind, please don't be offended at what I'm going to say. But I noticed as you was talking about your meeting, you drove the open bar. Why did you do that? I'm going to ask you to answer that.
No, why did I bring it up?
Yeah.
Because it's an option.
Because, yeah, it is. But it's something that moves the culture as well that we're in. Because it would bring up, I'm just using that because it caught my ear.
Right.
All right? And that's what drives. The method of what we have to do changes, but our message has to stay pure and has to stay the same.
One of the things I would hear a lot, particularly in the Republican Party, you hear people talk about different demographics. They'll say, how do you engage the black vote? Or how do you engage young people? And so like Pastor said, they may not do it like this. Here's my question. Should we be going after the young people? Or should we? We should.
Yeah.
But some people say, no, it's just they need to get on board.
It has to start at home.
It has to start at home.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right before I came in, I was looking at Breitbart News. The group with the highest support for Hamas is the 18 to 25-year-olds. Why are they in that position is because of what they have been indoctrinated with. That has developed their opinion. They didn't have the choice to weigh one way or the other. They were indoctrinated into that belief.
Yeah.
Now, we don't indoctrinate, but we do. We are to be sharing more with the young. We are to be less dependent on somebody else raising our kids instead of us raising our children, instead of allowing our children to be put in that position to be brainwashed.
Wow, that's good.
They would shut down the Department of Education. Your hands up.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Somebody has me on. I need to sit down, right?
To get to Ben's point, and then also the scripture that Adrienne started with, Ben is right. With the Board of Education, it just, out of Washington, D.C., influences Jefferson City by dollars. And Cape Girardeau has never seen a dollar that they weren't in love with. There are some school boards that won't take the money if they have to do certain things. That has actually happened in our state. But the thing that was what they're going after now is social emotional learning, and it's called WISC, WSCC, whole school, whole child, whole community, WSCC. So if you see that it's not good. So the way they have divided the standards is me, and there are objectives under me, and then now you know as a Christian we don't do me, right? We do him, and we do us as a fellowship, but it's not that way. They're teaching them individual significance, I guess. Yes. And then there's we, and then the third column is others. It sounds good, but the goal under others is to teach the children, it says this in black and white, to advocate. It doesn't define what they advocate for, but where do we see in our society advocates? Mostly. It's on the streets. It's, I don't even know what to call them. Right now we know who's advocating the most at the universities because of the war in Israel. But you're right, Ben, that the children are being indoctrinated and not toward the same values that most in this room carry, but it's also in our universities. And there's another word called capture. It's a buzzword in the education system, and it says we talk about homeschool is the only pure school. I will say that as far as maintaining, and it makes me mad because I don't have any opportunity for my grandchildren in that area because their parents have to work. There's two separate single parents now, and it's alarming. But private schools are under the capture philosophy as well because their teachers were taught and indoctrinated in the same universities that the public school teachers
no,
were.
They're not. They're somatically trained. They're Lutheran colleges.
I'm
private.
Well, some private schools.
You can't put them all in one basket.
Pardon me, I apologize for that.
Yeah.
And Joe, I don't know if you heard what she said, but she said all of the teachers at the Lutheran school, private schools, came out of the Lutheran University. I didn't know that, so great. But I do know that there are teachers that work in some private schools that came out of public universities, so that's called capture. But to your point in your scripture that you referred to, the beginning of that scripture says, "For if you remain silent at this time, relief," whoops, I lost it, here we go. "Relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place." Why? Because God is in control.
Yeah.
But if you and your family, may perish. But who knows? You have been here in this royal position for such a time as this. So the Lord will have his way and his will. We may be in the desert for 40 years. It may take us that long if we don't turn around. But he will have his way and his will, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This is a wonderful program.
All right. I'm gonna have to, I'd love to hear from you, but I just want to wrap this up. So I want to show one last thing here. Like I said, is it important to reach those people and to reach different people? We have to be relevant to them to do that, and I think it's important. And I think it's worth discussing. If we should be going that direction, because you want to leave a legacy. The John Maxwell. John Maxwell. He was working on a church. He took the church to high. It was like no one hardly there. He took the church to high heights, and it was growing, and it was prospering, and all that. And then God moved him on. He moved on somewhere else, and he had gotten a phone call that told him that the church had just sort of like disintegrated. That church, And then it hit him. He was like, "How could that be? I gave everything. It was growing. It was prospering." And it realized it hit him that he had not trained a successor. He had not poured into others who could carry it beyond him. So it was reliant upon him, whereas he needed to be investing in other people and developing the call, seeing that call in other people was so important. And so
I just want to show this. Here's just real quick, some young people, and they're talking about, you think young people aren't thinking about age? They want to see young people as well engaged in the process. So check this out.
Honestly, I used to have a bad thought about Trump consequence ever since Biden. I feel a little bit concerned about him running continuously. I hope that Trump does come back, or someone else, as long as Biden.
So what is it about Biden that bothers you?
I think it's mainly about his age and his mental state at the moment. He can barely hold up a conversation on camera.
I want to see some younger people in it. I mean, we've had some older people the last few years.
Yes. Are you concerned about that?
Absolutely. I mean, I voted for Biden myself, so, but I don't think that he should go again. He's just too old, and he's definitely shown, even 4 years, like, you're seeing it all decline.
Joe Biden, definitely kind of was like, I think we should have an age like maximum, because like you can't really fight against age or time. Like you can heal yourself, you can take medicine, do all this, but time is going to get you in the end, and genetics. So if you have like Alzheimer's or dementia, anything like that, you can't really fight it.
And you're sensing a little something going on with him.
Yes, ma'am. The age is kind of getting to him a little bit. What I haven't seen is him like not really being a president, but being an elderly like man. If that makes sense. Yeah, I gotta wonder.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much.
What was your name again?
Adrienne.
Adrienne.
So that's kind of interesting. I want to say this, though. I mean, it's good to hear their perspectives. And so maybe they think Biden is too old to be president, but no one is too old to be engaged in something that God has called us to do. We know, may not, not time to run for president or whatever, but what is it we are able to do because we do have significance. So I'm going to give this to Pastor, kind of just tie it all together. He's like, yeah, just kind of tie the whole thing together and just leave us with a thought.
Yeah.
And
for you, we host at Christ Church every Thursday a homeschool network. Last year we had about 80 kids coming every Thursday. This year there's over 100. I think there's nearly 140 kids coming in that we're hosting every week. That's showing that parents are more concerned. Ma'am?
Yeah, what is it on Thursday?
It's a homeschool. It starts they're there at 9 o'clock.
That's the co-op.
Yeah, co-op. That's the word. Couldn't think of it. A co-op. I've been asked more over the last number of years, or actually in the last year, about my succession plan. What are you going to do? Who are you going to leave this with? What does that look like? Because if we don't pour into somebody, what happens is we fall off the scene and then we're in chaos trying to get somebody. So it's really making me think that way. I'm not ready to quit. I'm not ready to stop. I'm going to be around for a long time. I plan on living 100 at least. And going. And I hope that I can keep communicating that way. But at the same time, it's interesting. They talk to her in a unique way, just behind the camera with a phone probably. So maybe they wouldn't have chatted with me like that. And I've learned one of the great things that happens is that most of our young people, especially our young adults, they are concerned. They don't like the screaming, the hollering, all the stuff that sometimes, to be honest, we get in. I don't even like it. That we can get into. Trying to be a voice to be heard. Sometimes they want an intelligent conversation for you and me. Sit down with them and ask them how they feel about something. And give them an opportunity to reply. That's all they're asking for. Right, wrong, or indifferent. They're wanting conversation with you. I have to do this with my family. What are you doing with yours? I sat, and I'll be done here, sat in a meeting in Dallas a number of months ago with a major leader, and he was talking about their values for their family. And his family, this man is probably 70 years old. He's been a major director in a church, but he's no longer doing that. He's now leads this area of ministry where he just, I guess you could say, builds leaders. That's all he does. Pours into them, him and his son. And what really captivated me was his son, who was probably, I would dare say, maybe mid-40s, late 40s. And he said, this is what we do on vacation. He said, when we go vacation together, he said, there's always one night we sit down as a family and we say, this is our values as a family. He said, from the time that I can remember, Dad would set us down every year and he said, this is the values of this family. And the more you put those values into your family, the more that they're going to live those things out. I believe we've got a great responsibility. And I'm going to say to you as grandparents, I've got 5 and 1 on the way. Going to be here next month. I believe we've got a great responsibility to keep telling them who they are. Because if we don't tell them who they are, the world is going to define them. That's why they're doing what they're doing, Ben, and their indoctrination. My granddaughter just turned 14. She's been in private school at Linwood up until this year. And economics made a decision that they couldn't send her to a private school where a lot of her friends went. And for the first time, she's about as tall as I am. My guys know her. Her name is JC, a beautiful young lady at 14. She's been the apple of her papa's eye. And for the first time, she's going off to the school prom or the school dance, whatever it was, for the first time. And she come to my house with my wife and her mom, and they were getting her ready and had her friend there to do her hair, and she put tears in this papa's eye. And as she's walking out the door, I said, JC, don't forget who you are. And we've got to keep putting that into the generation. Tell them who they are. Even if they're not yours, tell them who they are. Let me pray for you. Father, I thank you for a great night. And Father, for this moment that's so dear to all of us, because we all love this nation. And we love you, God, and we want righteousness to rule. Father, we've not done this well. This just didn't come about, Lord. Generations before us haven't really done it extremely well. And Lord, you know where we are. As our sister said, God, I believe that you have all things in hand. But I believe we can make it either easier or we can make it more difficult if we don't follow you and follow your plan. And I'm asking you tonight, Father, for me and for all of us here, that we would see our role even greater. God, as individuals that live in our communities, Father, as parents, as grandparents, Lord, even as co-workers or wherever we're positioned, that we would see a greater responsibility to declare who you are and your righteousness, but help others discover who they are. That God's righteousness would rule our nation. I pray for these that are coming up. Our friend here tonight that's running for office, and I know others that are being positioned. God, I'm asking you to give them wisdom and give them grace. Lord, to take the stand righteously that first will exalt you, because your word declares righteousness exalts the nation. And when you are Lord and you are God over the nation, God, then everything will fall in hand. God, I bless this people tonight. Give us wisdom to move forward into this time with this culture that maybe we have come to the kingdom for such a time as this. So I give you thanks in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Absolutely wonderful. Thank you both for coming.